next culture, that is the sericulture. Now, sericulture, as the name suggests, is the culture of silk by the rearing of silkworms. So what happens is that silkworms are reared from right at their mature larva stage, and the substance that is secreted out from the salivary glands are finally converted to the silk. Now, these silk fibers are used to weave and form the cloth that is obtained in the markets. So I'm sure your mother might be having these Kanjivaram saris, these silk saris that are really rich and are really expensive to be purchased. So since the sericulture is a culture of silkworms to obtain silk, it is a very profitable field because there's no investment that's going down for the production of the silk thread. It's organic, and the marginal profit that is obtained from this is a very huge one. That's why it's a very profitable business. Also, these silkworms are of a variety of types, but the silkworms that are present only on the mulberry trees and the silkworms that eat the ain leaves are the ones that produce the best quality of silk. Along with that, there is something known as the tussore silk. Now, the silk yield that we had, there are actually two types of the yields of silk. The first yield is the pre-silk, that is yield, and the latter silk, that is yield, is really strong, and that is known as a tussore silk, while the silk that is obtained before is rich in its quality and is most probably used. So, talking about the silk, we've understood about what exactly is silk and about how is it formed, and in just a gist we've understood. Just let's understand about the organism that creates this thread. So the organism that creates this thread is the silkworm, as I told you. So over here we'll understand the life cycle of the silkworm, about how is it able to make such secretions. So the life cycle of silkworm is similar to that of a mosquito. So what happens in the initial stage is that it's present, the mother lays the eggs. Obviously the laid eggs will mature over the while, and after maturing for this span, a fixed span, they would enter the larva stage. After moving on to the larva stage will mature. After maturation, the larva stage will enter the pupa stage. That's a step ahead of the larva stage. So there are basically 4 stages. Out of this, the third stage is the pupa stage. The fourth stage is the imago stage, and that is nothing but the adult moth. Imago state is nothing but the state where the silkworm is going to be the adult moth, that is imago in the scientific name. And again, this goes back to the same procedure where the matured adult moth lays eggs, and this cycle is completely related. From the eggs, again the larva stage is developed, matured larva turns to the pupa, then again to the adult moth, finally laying eggs. So this is a cycle that keeps on being repeated. But the question here that lies is, where exactly is the silk threads formed? So the silk threads are formed at the larval stage. How at the larval stage? Now we'll understand that. So at the larval stage, what happens is, at the mature larval stage, what would happen is, there are salivary glands being developed in this larva. So the salivary glands that are developed would be secreting a substance that would be really sticky and dense, and excess secretions of that would result into the long thread-like formations, and this thread-like formation would further result into drying when it comes in the contact of the air. So in the mature larval stage, there are secretions from the salivary glands. And now these salivary glands that secrete the thick sticky substance so when the sticky substance comes in contact with the air, that is the atmospheric air, so that's a condition over here we'll be writing. When this sticky substance would come in contact with air, it would form nothing but the silk fibers. Now, of course, obtaining silk is not a very easy process. So, we know that the end result is silk fiber. But how is it really obtained? So, these thick, sticky substances that came in contact with the air and formed thick threads. So, what does a larva do is it keeps on packing itself along with this thread and makes a cocoon. So, the cocoon you might have it observed everywhere. Actually, every stage of this, like a larva or a butterfly or any other insect would be having this stage with them. But the cocoon of the silkworm is really important because it has real commercial value, and this commercial value leads to the silk, leads to the product that is silk that is used. So these cocoons, they are actually obtained from these larvae, and what happens is they are boiled in the hot water and silk threads are obtained from there. So the direct product that is obtained is not the silk fiber, rather the cocoons that where these larvae, they enwrap themselves and form a very rigid structure with this thick sticky substance that in contact with air becomes hard, and this results in the formation of cocoon, from where these cocoons are boiled in hot water and finally the end product that is obtained is the silk that is further utilized at a large commercial stage. Now again I will be repeating this for you. So what we learned about sericulture was that sericulture was the culture of rearing silkworms to obtain silk. That would be the end product. Along with that, we also learned that it was a profitable business. Ever since, the value of silk is going to be really more in the markets, and the cloth that is weaved out of the silk is really expensive. What is the life cycle of a silkworm? Because we need to understand at what stage actually these secretions are being made, since it's an organic product. So the life cycle of the silkworm is similar to that of the mosquito over here. So it starts with the process where the mother lays eggs. These eggs are matured under the conditions over a span of time, a fixed span of time, resulting into larva. The larva again matures and enters a third stage, that's the pupa. Then it goes down to form the adult moth, that's the last stage, from where the again matured moth will lay eggs and finally the cycle will be repeated. Along with that, we learned that where was the exact stage where the secretions were seen. So the secretions were seen at the matured larval stage in the salivary glands. So salivary glands secreted thick sticky substance that when it came in contact with the air was the major factor affecting the formation of silk. So it came in contact with the air, finally it formed a cocoon. So this cocoon was nothing but when the larva had enwrapped itself completely with this sticky substance that became hard when it came in contact with air. Then on a commercial aspect, what we learned was that these cocoons, when they were boiled in hot water, they finally formed the end product, that was silk, and it had a real major commercial importance to in the aspects of economy also, because it is really expensive and it contributes a lot to the gross domestic product. Talking about pisciculture, what does pisciculture mean? So pisciculture is nothing but the culture of fish, is known as, in short, the whole of it is known as pisciculture. So there are a variety of fishes that we consume for eating, and these variety of fishes may include the freshwater fishes and also the seawater fish. So combining these, the consumption of fish was initially really naturally obtained. That means how much ever the fishes were present in the particular area, particular water body, would be consumed for the eating purposes, let it be the sea water or the freshwater fishes. But over the while, there were the increased demand of fish, and which resulted into the production of seeds. So these seeds in the sea or any other water body are the ones that have been utilized over the while and being cultured in excess to meet the excess and a variety of fishes that would be in demand over the while by the population. Also, the good quality fishes like seed or the spawn are the ones that have been made by the government. So the government would provide the good quality spawn or the fish seed, and this fish would include into the seafood list. But also the fishes, even after being included in the seafood list, there are freshwater fishes like katla, rohu or mrugal that are consumed and are edible. Along with that, also the seafoods, the sea fish that I told you, the salty water fish like boy, that's the mullet fish, and the mudushi, that is the shellfish, along with renavi and khasi are the types and the species that are utilized for consuming purposes. I'll repeat it again. Pisciculture is really simple and really short, and that is nothing but the culture of fishes. So just to meet the needs of the seafood being consumed over the while by man was on a natural level basis. But as the population increased, demands and varieties of fishes increased. So the varieties of fishes being increased in population was met by the seeds in seas or any other water body. Now these seeds of fish are the ones that are generated. So the government provides good quality spawn or fish seed to meet this variety of the fishes that are consumed over the while. Also, the fish includes in the seafood list. Now we know that there are freshwater fishes that we consume, also the seawater fish or the salty water fish that we consume. So the basic examples of freshwater fish is going to be katla, rohu or mrugal. And the fishes that are of the seawater are going to be the mullet fish, the mudushi, that's the shellfish, and the renavi along with khasi. So mullet fish is also known as boy. And from this we are done with the whole chapter, the whole explanation part of the chapter. Let's just have a quick summary of what we learned. We learned that in this chapter, not the animals that were used were not only for the purpose of agriculture, but also for physical labor and transportation. So the animals that were utilized for the purpose of physical labor and transportation would be like the buffaloes, the bullocks, the oxes, the asses, and these are the kind of animals that are responsible to perform heavy duty labor, and thus the man's needs become easier the consumption of energy from man is at an easier pace, thus relaxing the whole lifestyle and making the work easy. Along with that, we also learned about the cows and buffaloes being able to give milk and meat. So not only for the purpose of the transportation or the physical labor, but also for the dietary supplements, for the dietary needs, we learned that, of course, animals could serve, not only but plants, but also animals could serve this need. And then we learned about the crossbreeding. In crossbreeding, we learned that how these type of two strains of the animals of same species were crossbred to have a better yield in the end. We learned that this by the example of the Indian cow and Jersey or the Holstein strain of the cows that are foreign breeds. So we learned that if on an individual Indian cow base, one cow could yield only around 5 to 6 liters of milk. Yes, so what happened was that these two strains were crossbred, that is a Holstein or the Jersey, along with the Indian cow was crossbred, leading to a hybrid, the formation of a hybrid, and this hybrid could yield around 10 to 15 liters of milk. We learned this crossbreeding by the help of this example. Along with that, we learned about how different occupations could different type of animals serve. We learned also in these type of occupations and activities that the animals that could serve this purpose was the cows and the buffaloes for serving milk, as I told you earlier. Then for physical transportation, of course, for agricultural labor, for any other transportation purpose. Also, not only these, but for polyculture, for pisciculture, these are the animals, these are the marine animals that are utilized. So not only the animals on land, but also the marine animals are utilized to benefit the mankind. Along with that, also sheep rearing was one that we learned. Sericulture was the other occupation we learned performed by man. And we learned about various certain other the occupations like the lac culture. So we are done with understanding about everything in short. I hope this lecture was actually helpful for you to understand what I taught you in this chapter. But before this, let's just shift our focus to the exercise part. So we will start with the exercises just to evaluate how much of understanding have you been getting over the whole lecture.
Choose the right kindergarten, a right bag, and matching bottle to go with. The right school, the right friends. Choose the right subjects and score well. Be an expert in all. The right teacher, and make sure that they like you. Choose the right timing, the right bus, and take a cab if getting late. The right train, and don't stand near the gates. Mind the pockets. Better get into ladies' compartment. Make sure your mustache hasn't started coming. Choose the right study time and forget games. IPL, IHL, rock and metal, guitar, axe. The right group and be a model to your brother. Seriously. Choose the right syllabus, the right test paper. Keep guessing questions for exams. Choose the right branch, the right college, the right stream. Choose the right career. Lucky to have a father's business to take care of and a father to allow that. The right counselor, the right form, and make sure the project is submitted on time. Choose the right website and rely on your friends for more information. Oblivious of the sites they have been to, there is no end to your woes. Getting better with every step you climb up the ladder. The summer vacations shorter, the bucket list bigger. The night darker, the books heavier. The only light you have is your friends ahead of you. Probably he is right. Ever thought how? You got the direction? No more spending your energy and money on coaching classes. No more missing classes for rain, rally, and nonsense. Get your interest back in subjects through our creative ways of teaching. Doubts, concepts, applications, all explained through one vibrant animation. Subjects covered by multiple teachers with repeat telecasts. Special programs only for basic foundation and paper analysis. Personality development, career counseling, admissions, hobbies, all covered. A new approach to study with long-term perspective. So sit back comfortably in your homes and watch Study Spectrum TV channel.
Let's start with a very simple and easy activity first, and then we'll proceed on to the further heavy, hefty questions and answers for you people. I know, I understand how difficult it becomes to learn them all. So let's just start with the basic reasoning question and answer session. So here I have certain conditions from the chapter, and I'm going to repeat all this to you. I'm going to be telling all the statements to you, but you have to understand and you have to tell me the exact one word for every reasoning, for every statement. Okay, so let's start. Over here the first section is name the following. So in that comes the first question, that is the incurable animal disease. Just try remembering, where was this? Was this in the health of the animals part? Yes, it was, of course. As the name suggests, disease is related to health. This is how you can learn better actually, by just relating 2-3 things and understanding the connection. So, incurable animal disease, what would that be? In health you learned about dogs, you learned about birds, you learned about cows and other animals too. But what did you learn that one part? That one part was about rabies. That we learned that rabies was an incurable animal disease. Along with that, also the bird flu was an incurable disease. So we'll just write that down. The two incurable diseases that we learned in animals and birds were rabies and bird flu. Well, the answer to this is going to be just rabies, but still we wrote the bird flu part also in short. So the next is the animal that grows a pearl. Where did we learn this pearl? The pearl word came in the section of pearl culture. So in pearl culture we learned that how the oyster was the marine animal that was related to form the pearl by just one granule of sand being entered in its body. So we learned that the animal that is responsible for the growth of a pearl in its shell is known as the oyster. And the oyster is a marine animal. To be specific about. The last one is the main crop required for sericulture. Now we learned that in sericulture, the silkworms were the ones that grew on the various kind of trees or the other leaves or any other part. But we also learned that the main type was the mulberry trees and the ain leaves. So the answer here is going to be mulberry, or even to be specific, the ain leaves. Okay, I'll repeat this once again for you. If you have not noted it down as yet, just note it down and grasp it and understand what is it. So the name of the following. You have to name the following things. So in that section, we learned about the incurable animal disease. The one incurable animal disease was the one that we learned in the section of health. In that we learned that there are treatments for almost every disease, but there are certain medical conditions for these animals that have not been found a treatment for as yet. So the ones that are these are the rabies and the bird flu, because the treatment for this is not available, and if you have a feeling that a dog nearby your street or your pet is behaving a little weird, is feeling a little sick, so you should immediately get them to the veterinary care, because that is a wise step before something happens more to your dog. And if the time is gone, of course it's a problem. So definitely the answer for incurable diseases is going to be rabies and is going to be bird flu in case of birds. So the next one is the animals that grow a pearl. The animals that grow a pearl are going to be the oyster, because the oyster has shell structure in which once the grain of sand enters inside its body, it is transformed to a pearl over the while. Also, we learned that there are technologies that just inserted one grain of sand into the body of oyster that increase the production of the pearls over the while. So we also learned that from oyster that it was a marine animal. Then the last one was the main crop required for sericulture. That would be nothing but the mulberry or the cane leaves. So I hope you were able to answer most things by your own self and were able to understand it, because understanding the question is the first important part, then the answer comes later. Then we'll shift our focus to the next part, that is to answer the following questions. In here, the first question is, in what way are lice and ticks a nuisance for the sheep? Now this is actually really basic. I told you about this in sheep culture, sheep rearing. So since we understand that sheep has wool on its body, and that wool is helpful for us to protect ourselves in the winter, we also learned that there are high chances because of this that the organisms and the parasites like ticks and lice and ticks are going to be present in their body in the anus region or the neck region or the body surface, and this is going to be really bad for them, because these ticks, they suck blood from the body of sheep. So while they suck blood from the body of sheep, they leave a open wound. Now since there are maggots and flies roaming all around these bodies of the animals like sheep and cows or any other animal that is having all these flies around them or the maggots, it becomes really dangerous for them, and the chances for them to become ill is really more, because the maggots, we know, are responsible for carrying germs on them, and if the maggots sit on these wounds, on these fresh wounds of sheep, then there are chances that these germs are going to enter the sheep's body through these wounds and cause it a infection or make it ill. In this way, we understand that the ticks and lice are a nuisance to sheep. So I'll write that answer down for you people. So we learned that lice and ticks are responsible for creating wounds on the body of sheep that will have a issue if the maggots sat on them, and also the maggots were a hazard. For the sheep with the wounds, as they had a chance to fall ill. So you can frame your answer in your own sentences unless and until you have understood the whole concept of the question. Let's just shift to the next question, that is, what are the occupations included in animal husbandry? So we learned about the occupations, that was the animal husbandry was related to poultry farming, related to sheep rearing, to the lac industry, pisciculture, sericulture, and we also learned about the pearl culture. So in animal husbandry, there were 6 cultures, along with also these animals being used for agricultural purposes, along with public transportation and physical labor works. So I'll just write it down for you. That is, first would be pisciculture, sericulture, then pearl culture, the lac industry, along with that we learned about the sheep rearing, and also animal husbandry is useful for physical labor, for transportation, along with a part in the agriculture too. So we'll just read that out again. That would be pisciculture 1, sericulture 2nd, pearl culture 3rd, the 4th one we learned was sheep rearing, the 5th one was the lac industry, the 6th one was physical labor and transportation also, along with agriculture. Is there something that we're missing? Let's just read it again. Pisciculture 1, sericulture 2, pearl culture, the lac industry, sheep rearing and physical labor along with transportation and agriculture. Also for the meat and milk that is supplied by these animals. So the meat that is supplied by the animals is included into the poultry farming. So that's an addition over here, poultry farming. So let's just move our attention to the last question, that is, what are the differences in between the layers and the broiler birds? So in the chapter we went to the section of poultry farming. Over there we learned that there were 2 types of birds and these were classified under the needs that we had from them. So the layers would be the birds that would be useful for the purpose of laying eggs, while the broilers were the birds that were useful for the purpose of obtaining meat from them. So that's the only difference in the birds like layers and broiler birds. The layer birds would never be utilized for the meat purposes because they would be given less intake of food, they would be given less food to obtain maximum amount of eggs laid by them. But in the case of broiler birds, they were well fed and they were made fleshy and hefty in order to have the marginal and maximum profit from them. So I'll just write the difference, that is, the layer birds are the ones that are responsible for laying eggs, the birds that were like in the category of the broilers were responsible for providing meat. So the main work is just to give meat, the broilers, while the layers have the work of laying eggs. According to that, the diet content given to each one of them is also different. We will just repeat the whole of it again in very fast way so that you grasp it fast. So in what way are lice and ticks a nuisance to the sheep? Now, the lice and ticks are a nuisance to the sheep because they are responsible for creating wounds on the body of the sheep, like at the places like neck, the area of the anus or the whole body surface on itself, and this is responsible for creating these open wounds where the maggots could sit and transfer the germ into the bodies of these sheep and make them susceptible to a disease or infection. And in this way they prove to be a nuisance for the sheep. Now the next one I told you about, what is it? Like, what are the occupations included in animal husbandry? We learned them pretty well, and we learned that pisciculture, sericulture, pearl culture, the lac industry, along with the sheep rearing, the physical labor and the transportation that is performed by these animals, also the contribution to agriculture and the poultry farming were certain occupations that were included into the animal husbandry. Then we have a last question, that is, what are the difference in between the layers and the broilers? So we understood that layers were the eggs that were the birds or the animals that were responsible for just laying eggs. That is why they were included in the category of layers. While broilers were the animals or the birds that were responsible for providing meat. So their diet content was different. The diet content of layers was such that in minimal diet provided to them, they laid excess amount of the eggs. So the example for this is white leghorn. Along with over here, the broilers were the ones that were fed really heavy diet with supplementary diets to it, so that they became fleshy and hefty, and the meat content obtained from these chicken or these birds that were the broiler birds were really rich in the fleshy content. Let's move to the next section right now. I hope you have understood these two exercises pretty well. Let's just move to the give reason section, because that is an important part where you get a reason to analyze about how much of grasping have you done in the whole chapter.